Welcome back, capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are looking back at another amazing week of college football. It was week 9 of the 2024 college football season. We had a couple upsets, a few close calls, and a ton of football that we will be looking at and talking about today. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Starting with our predictions from this past week. If you have not heard, we are potentially giving away $100 to one of our subscribers. If you want a chance at winning, be sure to follow us on social media. Links to those will be in the description below, but that is only if we do not correctly predict over 75% of the college football games correctly this year. This week's games will be popping up on your screen, and we ended up predicting 42 of the 57 games correctly this week, and that brings us to 414 of 550 correct predictions on the year for a winning percentage of 75.3%. Still just barely over that 75% threshold. We still have a great shot at that $100, so be sure to follow us and stay tuned for our updates. Now let's revisit some of our big impact matchups from last week. Starting with the game on Friday night, it was Boise State at UNLV. We thought UNLV would take this one 41-33, but Boise actually locked in and won this game 29-24. And coming into this one, we liked both of these teams. We just thought it would come down to which quarterback played better in this one, and it did, but we picked the wrong quarterback. It was actually Maddox Madsen, your player of the game actually, who was arguably the better quarterback in this one. Not as many total yards as Malik Williams, but more careful with the football. Boise State had no turnovers, which helped them seal this one and move to 6-1 on the year. And like we said, your player of the game in this one is Maddox Madsen. He threw the ball 33 times, 18 completions, 209 yards, and a touchdown, with 3 carries for an additional 58 yards and another touchdown in this one. And moving on to your top 25 matchup in Notre Dame versus Navy. We thought this one would be close. We had Notre Dame winning 28-20, and they actually blew out the midshipmen 51-14. And this is exactly the kind of performance you were hoping for if you're a Notre Dame fan. We thought this one would be neck and neck, but the Irish really separated themselves here, showed that they are a true playoff contender by routing the United States Navy, something that most countries haven't even been able to do. They were way more efficient. They surprisingly had a much better rushing attack, and the defense forced 6 total turnovers to make this an easy day for Notre Dame. And your player of the game is the linebacker Jalen Sneed. He had 9 tackles, half a tackle for loss, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown in this game. Now let's look at Missouri at Alabama. We thought Alabama would win this one 27-17. We should have been more confident in them, or I guess less confident in Missouri. Alabama ended up winning this one 34-0, confirming what we already knew, that Missouri is a huge fraud. They are absolutely not a great football team this year, and it didn't help that Brady Cook had to leave the game with injury. Drew Pine came in for him and threw 3 picks to seal it for the Crimson Tide. But we got to give credit to Alabama here. They wiped the floor with this Missouri team, something that should give them confidence heading into the rest of conference play. It wasn't the hardest day for them, but the ground game looked solid. Still not very efficient on third down, but overall they looked a lot better than they have at times this year. And with that, your player of the game is the running back Justice Haynes. He had 8 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown. Next, let's look at Illinois at Oregon. We thought Oregon would pull this one out 32-14, and they did, with a score 38-9. This game felt like it was over before it even began. Illinois had no real answer for Oregon's offense. The Ducks averaged nearly 8 yards per play against a fairly decent Illinois defense. That just goes to show you how good Oregon is this year. They've really hit their stride, in no small part due to the incredible play from Dillon Gabriel, who we have talked about too much on this channel already. But the defense also stepped up in a big way in this one, holding Illinois to 5 of 13 on third down, 0 for 3 on fourth down with 2 picks. Great game all around for the Ducks, and your player of the game is the quarterback Dillon Gabriel. 18-26 passing for 291 yards and 3 touchdowns. Did throw a pick in this one, but he had an additional 3 carries, 5 yards, and a touchdown. Now let's look at Texas at Vanderbilt. We thought Texas would win this one by double digits, 35-20, and they actually won by 3, beating Vanderbilt 27-24. This one was obviously a lot closer than we expected. Vandy scored late to make it a close game, but Texas held on to seal this one, and it wasn't really a bad day day for the Longhorns. The turnovers by Ewers made it to where Vandy could stick around, but that defense was great otherwise. They held a generally efficient Vanderbilt rush offense to a very inefficient 3.7 yards per carry, and also held them to 3 of 12 on third down and forced 3 Commodore turnovers. Great day for the Longhorn defense, not so much for Quinn Ewers and the offense, but they get the win regardless, and your player of the game is going to be the wide receiver, DeAndre Moore Jr. He had 6 receptions for 97 yards, 16.2 yards on average, and 2 touchdowns. And last in your big impact matchups, it was Penn State at Wisconsin. We thought Penn State would pull this one out 27-21, and they did with a final score of 28-13. This was around the realm of what we expected this one to be. We thought it would be a little bit closer, and up until the fourth, it was, relatively speaking, but Wisconsin met the brick wall we expected them to. They held that Wisconsin rushing attack that averaged over 200 yards a game the previous 3 weeks to 81 yards on the ground. They also held the Badgers to under 40% on third down, which is very, very ideal. And unfortunately, Drew Aller did leave the game in this one, but their backup Bo Prabula came into this one and performed about as good as you could ask. He went 11-13 for 98 yards and a score through the air with 28 additional yards on the ground. Not amazing, but in one half of football, didn't throw the game away. And your player of the game in this one is actually going to be the running back, Katron Allen. He had 11 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown with an additional 4 receptions and 22 yards to put him over 100 scrimmage yards on the game. And now let's look at your game of the week. It was LSU at Texas A&M. We predicted Texas A&M to win this one 31-28. Got a lot of pushback for it on TikTok, not so much on here, but we were right. Texas A&M did win this game 38-23. Much bigger deficit than we initially expected, and I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty nervous going into halftime of this game. It looked like picking against LSU would prove to be our fatal flaw again this week, but then in came Marcell Reed in the second half, absolutely lit it up, delivered a beautiful pass to Noah Thomas late in this one that really opened it up for the Aggies, and the biggest X factor in this one for the Aggies was completely shutting down the run. The Tigers could not get anything going on the ground against that stout A&M defensive line, and that forced the game to be put in the hands of Garrett Nussmeier, who we had a lot of good things to say about before this game, but really fell flat in this one. He had over 400 yards on 25 completions, but that came from 50 attempts while also throwing 3 game-changing interceptions. And like we said, defense wins championships, but your player of the game will come on the other side of the ball. It is the quarterback, Marcell Reed. In one half of play, he went 2 for 2 for 70 yards through the air, and he carried the ball 9 times for 62 yards and 3 touchdowns. Great game from him, and now it looks like the Aggies are in a bit of a quarterback controversy. And with that out of the way, let's move on to your team and player of the week. As always, you voted on it, and for your team of the week, it's going to be the Kennesaw State Owls, the newest team in the FBS in Conference USA. They get their first FBS win ever this week against a previously undefeated Liberty team that didn't look bad, all things considered. In truly historic fashion, we couldn't be happier for the Owls here, and we hope they can compound that into some even better wins down the line. Truly awesome win here. If you didn't get to watch it, go back and watch the highlights. It was a true David and Goliath by every definition of the term. It was amazing. You should go and watch it. And for your player of the week, it's going to come from Arkansas. It was the quarterback Taylon Green. He had an outstanding performance against Mississippi State this weekend. He really put the team on his back, throwing for over 300 yards and 5 touchdowns, while gaining an additional 79 yards and 8 carries on the ground, with a rushing touchdown as the cherry on top. It was a great day for the Razorbacks, who improved to 5-3 and are on the cusp of bowl eligibility, but it was especially a great game for your player of the week, Taylon Green. And now let's move on to our Let's Talk About It segment, starting with Nebraska. Let's talk about the Huskers. We don't usually have a ton of great things to say about the losing teams week to week, but there is a lot to say about this Nebraska team after taking the number 4 team in the country to the wire. The Huskers actually led this game in the fourth quarter, and while it did end in predictable fashion with Nebraska fumbling the game away late, the Huskers have a lot to hang their hat on here. They held a previously elite rushing team to 64 yards on the ground, an abysmal 2.4 yards per carry. On top of that, they held the Buckeyes to 1 of 10 on third down, which is insane, seeing as Ohio State was the 12th best team in the country on third down coming into this one. Very impressive day for Nebraska. Couldn't finish with the win, but if they play like that the rest of the way, they could absolutely win 3 or all of their next 4 4 games. And next, ironically enough, let's talk about the Colorado Buffaloes. The Buffaloes have really hunkered down this year. They've started blocking out the noise, and they're churning out a lot of wins in the Big 12. You can say what you want about the level of play they're experiencing in the Big 12 this year. You'd probably even have a decent point made there. But this is the same Colorado team that lost to teams like Stanford and Washington State last year, and now they're beating those teams, and some fairly decent ones at that. We wouldn't go as far as to say they're Big 12 title contenders, playoff contenders, whatever else your average Boulder resident is probably saying right now, but we have to give credit where credit is due. The Buffs beat Cincinnati by double digits to improve to 6-2 and are now bowl eligible in year 2 under Deion Sanders. And last, let's talk about the Utah Utes. If it wasn't for BYU, the Utah Utes would be our biggest preseason prediction whiff in this conference. We know Cam Rising hasn't played, but even when he did, it didn't seem like it mattered. They've dropped all of their last 4 games to bring them to 4-4 on the year, and they lose this week to an equally unfortunate Houston team via a walk-off field goal. And in a year where the Big 12 is still wide open for the taking, it seems like Utah is fumbling a perfect opportunity, especially because the offense has been abysmal. We know Andy Ludwig stepped down, but in their last 4 games, they've averaged 12.5 points per game, which is almost last in the country in that time frame. Not sure what the next move is for the Utes, but they desperately need to figure something out if they even want to see a bowl game this year. And now let's move into the Week 10 Top 25 Power Rankings, starting with some teams that dropped out. It was Illinois at 25, Navy at 22, and Missouri at 20, who all similarly got blown out this week. And when you get blown out in that 20 to 25 range, it's a pretty safe bet you're going to drop out. These 3 teams do this week. And your 25th team is a team that lost but didn't get blown out. It is the Vanderbilt Commodores. Pretty decent showing against a much higher rated Texas team. They'll move down to 25, followed by Colorado at 24, jumping into our top 25. With them being in the Big 12, all of the games on their schedule are winnable. Will be interesting to see if they can maintain that level of success and potentially play in the Big 12 title game. It's a long shot, but Colorado is on a roll, and they are 24th in our rankings this week. And next we have Washington State jumping into our top 23. They've quietly gone 7-1 through week 9. The level of competition isn't amazing for the Cougars, but we'd be foolish to deny them a top 25 spot here. They've earned it, just like the 22nd ranked team in our rankings, Arkansas. This may be a bit controversial. They are 5-3, but they have quality wins and quality losses. They win big over Mississippi State this week, but they are moving up to 22 in your rankings this week, followed by Army moving up to 21 and SMU moving up to 20. And SMU is coming off a very, very bad win over a solid Duke team. Very mixed feelings about that one, but a win over a 6-1 conference opponent is at least going to move you up 1 spot here. But what won't move you up a spot is having a sorry game against a bad Kansas team like Kansas State at 19 did. They'll stay put for now, followed by Ole Miss at 18, who drops another 2 spots. More of the same here. This game had no business being as close as it was. If Ole Miss is the team that Todd thinks they are, they're going to need to show it for us to move them up any further. Next, we have Pitt and Boise State moving up a spot to 17 and 16, both with 2 very good wins over conference opponents this week. They're both very exciting to watch this year. And following them, we have LSU dropping 7 spots to number 15 after losing a game they looked like they were in the driver's seat of at halftime. Doesn't lend well in terms of our confidence in them going further. But after them, we have Alabama moving up a spot to 14, and realistically we could have moved them up more, but they didn't look amazing in the win against a team we think is heavily overrated, even by us, believe it or not. And next we have BYU staying put at 13. They rack up another solid win. Not sure why they were dogs here. We were relatively confident in them in that one, and they prove us right yet again. And moving into our top 12, at 12, we have Tennessee moving down 2 spots. And this may seem unfair because, in all honesty, it is. Realistically, Tennessee shouldn't move down on a bye week, but we here at Ono Sports don't like to play by the rules, and we think every team above them is just better in general. So we feel like we have no choice but to move them down this week, and that is the exact same for Iowa State, who we also moved down 2 spots to number 11. And this makes us feel even worse because Iowa State is undefeated. We already know that this won't be a very popular thing to do to an undefeated team on a bye week, but that's That's only because Indiana moves up 2 spots to 10. We just like them more than the prior 2 teams. They beat a half-decent Washington squad by 2 touchdowns with their backup quarterback, which is something you'd expect from Georgia or Texas or Alabama, but it is Indiana. Some people are going to be slow to give them the benefit of the doubt, but they're legit and they're going to be even more dangerous when Rourke is back. And after them, we have Texas A&M moving up to number 9. They move up 5 spots this week, and that's pretty self-explanatory in our opinion. They beat a top 10 team, so they jump into the top 10 themselves. We have them at 9 this week, and following them, we have Notre Dame at number 8. They have that pivotal win over A&M earlier this season, and they're coming off a huge win against a very solid Navy team. So we have them moving all the way up to 8 this week, and for the rest of our poll, we have to issue a boring warning. I repeat, a boring warning. We have almost no movement the rest of the way. Clemson was on a bye week. They stay at 7. Miami's at 6, who beat a bad Florida State team. Still side-eyeing you, Miami. You don't get a pass just for beating the lousy Florida State Seminoles this week. At 5, we have Penn State, who played well, but not really good enough for us to feel justified in moving them up. After them, we have Ohio State at 4 and Texas at 3, switching spots. And we feel like this is justified. Ohio State looked relatively pedestrian in their close win over Nebraska. And Texas also didn't look amazing, but they did look much better. And the final score makes their game look a lot closer than it actually was, opposed to Ohio State, who legitimately trailed Nebraska and was close to losing late in their matchup. Following them, we have Georgia at 2 and Oregon at number 1. Great win for the Ducks this week. Their resume just got almost infinitely stronger, and they just look amazing all around. We're really looking forward to seeing if they can keep up the momentum the rest of the way, especially in their matchup against Michigan next week. But for now, we have Oregon remaining atop our rankings for the 2nd week in a row. And that's going to wrap up this episode on the O&O Sports YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you later in the week for our Week 10 preview.